So I wanted to share a little vulnerable post with you guys about somebody had made a comment on one of my posts recently, and they said, you know, somebody who has been to a certain level of pain, only somebody who has actually experienced that can write some of the things that you write. And it's clear that you've experienced something really dark. And I'm just curious how you came out of it. And I started to think about it when I read it a couple of days ago and was asking myself how I came out of it because I don't think there's any modality or book or guru or podcast or anything that is going to tell you how to heal through something incredibly dark. I think that everybody's journey is different and you are the only person that can tell you how to do it. And that's the reason why on my page, I don't ever want to be the page that people go to and say she's got it all figured out because I don't. I don't have all the answers, and the more that I learn, the more that I don't know. However, I like to talk about some of the things that I think about. I like to share thought-provoking posts that help you to see something that is incredibly heavy in a different way. Because in my mind, the way that I see healing is just perspective shifts. They offer you, they can take something that's really heavy and make it lighter. And that's how I have really worked through some of the things that I have been through. And it's taken a lot of self-discovery and sitting with myself in silence. There was a period of time that I really didn't talk a lot. And I started to hear my own inner voice whenever I did that, as well as I stopped listening to what people were saying and I started feeling what people were saying. And it got to a point where I became so in tune with myself and the people around me that it was like the illusions lifted. And a lot of it was this mindset that I had and these beliefs that I had that made me think that I had to think a certain way. And I never gave myself the space to expand and to think differently. And when I started to I did these little self hypnosis and meditations like in 2014. I started there and I was having these really wild experiences in my meditations, and everything that I was hearing in my meditations happened. And they started to come true. And I thought, okay, there's something deeper here. And that was when I started to really discover who I was. I had never picked up a paintbrush before in my life. And when I started doing these meditations, I could hear that I was meant to paint. So I just started painting. And eventually it led me to a place where I was making, $3,000 per art piece, which I know is not a lot for some artists, but I was starting to make money. I was starting to figure out who I was. I had a style. I had, there was a part of me that was coming through my artwork. And it was the process of just sitting in that darkness and in that pain and really taking responsibility for the choices that I had made and releasing the blame. For a very long time, I was very angry. And I knew how angry I was, and I didn't want to be angry because that is not who I am. That's not my personality. I am, we're allowed to have sacred rage and we're allowed to be angry about injustices, but this was an anger that was consuming me to the point that I could not stand myself. I could not stand looking in the mirror anymore. And I didn't want my children growing up having a mother like that. And when I had my third child, something shifted in me, and it was like I started to realize that maybe a lot of my pain stemmed from a place of not being understood. And I knew that my third child was a little bit different. I knew she was really sensitive, and I knew that she had a very angelic little personality. And I needed to become the type of person that she felt safe around. That was when I really shifted. That was when things really changed for me. And I know that not everybody is given an opportunity like that. I'm still very grateful and blessed that God sent me that little girl because it changed me. I was given a second chance at life, and I wanted to be that safe space for her. But in the middle of all of that, of becoming the safe space for her, I started becoming that safe space for myself. And I think that we have it backwards. We think that we have to go look for gurus, and we have to look for the best book, and we have to look for the best podcast, um, or you got to find the best modality. And when you do that, you're still reaching outside of you. And I think when I finally came to the terms that I was intuitively guiding myself to the place that I needed to go, and that's not going to look the same for you as it is for me. It's not going to look like doing meditations. It could be something completely different. It could be, you taking this random vacation and all of a sudden you meet somebody who teaches you more about yourself than you've ever known. It looks different for everybody. But for me, I started realizing that I could trust myself more than anybody else. And that's really hard for somebody who has self-abandoned their entire life, who has masked a lot of who I really was. And when I started to really own the divinity inside of myself and really believing that my intuition and my inner voice was the only guidance that I needed to be listening to, when I realized that that was part of God, your body is a temple and your inner voice it's the God inside of you. And everybody thinks that when you say that you're trying to make yourself appear as a God. That's not what that means. What it means is that God speaks to you. It's the same thing as being in a prayer. People that are Christians, they pray and they get guidance, or they know that God's telling them something. That is what I'm talking about. That's, to me, intuition is just another word for, praying and receiving guidance. It's the same thing. But for me, it was trusting myself again. It was realizing that I was the best answer. And I found that by having a relationship with God. And that relationship will look different for everybody. It came in different phases for me. One phase was gardening and really, connecting with Mother Nature again and realizing that I could grow my own food. And it was a process of waiting and being patient and sitting with the seeds and talking to the plants and realizing that I was connected in some way. And then at some points it was walking in nature and putting my feet in the mud, in the river or the stream or wherever I was, and connecting in that way. Sometimes it was sitting in complete and total silence and in so much pain. It was moments like that they don't talk about in church. That was what my connection with God looked like, and that's not going to be the same for everybody else. And I think that when you finally meet yourself, it's such a cliche thing to say, but it's really where I started to feel whole again. When I started to trust my own voice and what my inner guidance was telling me over anybody else. I had reached out and listened to everybody else around me except for myself. And when you finally get to a place where you trust your own inner guidance over everything else, and you understand that inner guidance is God, when you get that, when you put those two together and you start to make sense of it all, and you realize that you've been connected to God the entire time, that you're just a conduit for his voice, her voice, whatever it is for you, stop judging what that relationship with God looks like for other people, and start having your own relationship and understanding that it's okay for it to look different than everybody else. It's a matter of the way it feels. And you don't have to explain that to anybody, and you don't have to defend it, and you don't have to, be the type of person that is like, well, you need to believe it the way that I believe it. What does it mean to you? That's all that matters. And I think when you get to that place, you will start to feel whole again. And it's not going to happen overnight. But you will start to begin to feel the light at the end of the tunnel.